our Community Cop family to, when you look at our YouTube page, that you subscribe and then give us a thumbs up on the actual video. You know, those two things are very important. Subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up if you like the video, or give us a thumb down if you don't. According to the historical piece on October 2nd, 1962, Thurgood Marshall was sworn into the U.S. Supreme Court. He was the first African-American appointed to the Supreme Court. And prior to being assigned to the Supreme Court, he was the chief counsel for the NAACP. We had a very distinguished history as an attorney. He represented the chief counsel for the Legal Defense Fund. He also won numerous cases, Supreme Court cases as an attorney. One of the most known cases was the Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka. Some of you may not know, Thurgood Marshall was the lead attorney in that argument, winning that case with outlawed separate but equal entrance into public education. So he had a very much distinguished career, and he should always be remembered by members of our community as an activist attorney. He was not only attorney for filthy lucre, for money, but he definitely contributed much in the defense of African Americans. He utilized his talent as an attorney to defend our community. So to that, he should always be remembered, great Thurgood Marshall.
Right, and also his time in the Supreme Court, he did a lot of work to benefit our community and made some decisions on some very keen, important cases. Also, Noel, James Meredith, he captured the world's attention in 1975, September 30th / October 1st, which you and I have discussed, becoming the first African-American to attend the segregated University of Mississippi.
Right, on October 1st, I thought it was 62, James Meredith became the first Black student in the University of Mississippi. As you stated, Julian, is a very tumultuous entrance into the University of Mississippi. Of course, prior to attending Mississippi, he spent 9 years in the military. He was assigned to the Air Force, and you would think that someone as distinguished, that someone who made the ultimate sacrifice in terms of his time and placing himself in danger by being a member of the military, would, this would give him access to a lot of the benefits that this country is to offer, because he, put his life and defended this country with his life. But unfortunately, after he applied to the University of Mississippi and was accepted, his application was accepted, when they found out that he was an African American, of course, they rejected his application. Now, mind you, this is years before the Brown versus Board of Education decision was made. So legally, he was on solid ground in terms of applying to the University of Mississippi. He ultimately filed a lawsuit, and of course, he won his lawsuit. So the University of Mississippi was forced by the Supreme Court. This lawsuit went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they decided, based on Brown versus Board of Education, that he had every right to apply, and if he qualified, be accepted into the University of Mississippi. He was accepted, but the state of Mississippi fought his acceptance. There were riots. There was thousands of individuals who made an appearance at the university to stop this one Black individual who had aspirations of applying and being accepted into advanced academia. And the white community in Mississippi was so outraged that they came out violently to stop his being allowed just to study. So fortunately, the president sent over 500 federal troops, sent military police, had to send the National Guards, because white residents, and we're not talking about what some would consider thugs or criminals. We're talking about mothers, fathers, preachers, teachers, so-called responsible members of the white society in Mississippi, who are acting so illegally and so outrageous, so violently against one man attending the university, that the president was forced to send, all of these military individuals to the school. James Meredith said, "The day for the Negro being a coward is over." So we applaud him for his sacrifice. He ultimately graduated from the University of Mississippi as a lawyer. And of course, he had many contributions to the advancement of our community. But kudos go to Thurgood Marshall and our brothers, Jane Meredith, for their contribution into the advancement of our community in academics and in other areas.
Yeah. So his application was actually in 61, 62, but he was actually accepted in 1975. The fight went from 61, 62 to 75 when he was actually accepted. And now the Attorney General had to send federal troops to escort him into the school because there was such riots and them attempting to not allow him to attend the University of Mississippi. So Noel, thank you for that. You know, we appreciate the historical piece. I mean, there's a real battle between you and Mike. I don't know who's going to be the head historian. You guys are both doing phenomenal jobs. All right. So now we're going to talk about the case of Breonna Taylor. Now, Noel, we were just talking about, you know, prior to coming on air, the grand jury, a member of the grand jury filed a notice asking for the grand jury minutes to be released and made public.
Right. You know, this is a story that evidently has no end. And of course, after Attorney General Daniel Cameron had this big press conference where he made these certain pronouncements as it relates to the innocence of two other officers. Of course, one officer was indicted, Jonathan Mattingly and Miles Cosgrove, were two other officers that were involved into the death of Sister Breonna. They weren't indicted. And when Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General, made this grand theatrical presentation before the press, he indicated, or he implied, that these individuals, Officer Mattingly and Cosgrove, wasn't indicted because the grand jury didn't indict them. He sort of implied to the public that it wasn't his decision not to indict these two officers, but it was a grand jury. And as you stated, Julian, one of the members of the grand jury was so outraged when she had an opportunity to listen to his presentation to the public and placed the blame on these officers not being indicted on the grand jury. She said, well, listen, we were never given the presentation on whether to indict these officers on any criminal charges. He never made a presentation to the grand jury on these two officers. So this grand jury, as you said, Julian, unnamed at the time, you know, via their attorney, is asking for the grand jury recordings and transcripts to be released to the public. They're also asking for the right to make public statements. This individual, be a male or female, wants to make public statements as it relates to the Attorney General's comments. And of course, this grand jury's pronouncements are causing a lot of friction, and it's causing, of course, a lot of feedback. And this is what some of us had our doubts about when the Attorney General made his pronouncement to the public. You know, what some people don't know is that when a district attorney or prosecutor makes a presentation to the grand jury can only decide or make a decision on based what they were presented. If you don't present particular charges to the grand jury, you know, towards a defendant, then they won't decide. They can't make a determination on it. So this jurist is saying we didn't indict these police officers or give a true bill saying that they should go to trial because we wasn't presented with that opportunity. It wasn't an option. So, you know, that was very controversial. And there's a whole lot of other controversial statements that we've learned after this Attorney General's comments.
Now, initially, it was reported that the Attorney General was going to have the grand jury information and minutes released by Wednesday of this week, which would have been September 30th. But now he's requesting for a delay in releasing it, which is going to be Friday, which I believe is going to be the 2nd of October, because he's asking to redact some information. And I'm assuming that it's not going to be an information that's pertinent to the case, other than names of witnesses and addresses of witnesses and any other information that would expose someone who testified, a public person who testified in this particular case?
Yes, and I think this is just simply a delay tactic. I think the Attorney General Daniel Cameron was caught with his hand in a cookie jar. I think if it was left up to him, this case, as it relates to his office, for these two police officers, would be a bygone conclusion that that part of the case was over. Of course, since the jurist and the judge has forced his hand in ordering him to release the recordings and grand jury transcripts. Now, initially he said it would be done by Wednesday. Now he's asking for a delay, saying that certain information have to be redacted, as you stated, Julian, names, addresses, telephone numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, I believe the judge will give him the opportunity to redact, that information. But what is inevitable is that the public is going to get the opportunity to see exactly what was done in this previously considered a secret proceeding, the grand jury. We're going to get to see whether or not he made a strong presentation to the grand jury on all three officers. Of course, we want to talk about later, during this program, about some comments he made after all of this have blown up in his face and all the criticism that has been receiving since his press conference from the public, including the family, including the legal representatives of the family, all of the feedback and the brushback and some of the information that's being talked about now. So the judge probably give him the opportunity to redact all of that information. And once it's been redacted, it's inevitable that the public is going to have the opportunity to see what actually occurred within the grand jury. There's a lot of information that's come out since this press conference, such as in this press conference last week, Attorney General Cameron stated that one individual, one community resident, stated that he heard the police officers announce themselves prior to banging in Breonna Taylor's door. We're now been told and learned that his first initial statements was that he didn't hear police officers announce themselves, say police, when they initially knocked on her door. And also we learned that when he made his presentation to the grand jury, there's a good chance that 12 individuals who also are neighbors of Breonna Taylor, who stated that they never heard the police officers announce their presence, that was never mentioned to the grand jury. None of them never had the opportunity to make a statement to the grand jury. So clearly, this appears to be a one-sided presentation by the district attorney as it relates to facts. The district attorney is a fact finder. He should present all the pertinent facts to the grand jury, but for him to take the changed testimony of one individual and ignore the testimony of the statements of 12 individuals is clearly biased and clearly presidential. So I think he's not going to be too happy when his grand jury recordings and transcripts are made public.
Well, listen, we know it's always stated, and it's a cliche, that the grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. And the reason why that's said is because they have the opportunity, meaning the attorney, the prosecuting attorney. Now, remember, we're talking about prosecutors. These are people who are working for the state, who are looking to indict someone who they believe is responsible for committing a crime, possible crime. So they have the opportunity to present their case in their favor. And it appears that based on the information that's being given by this juror, by the information that's given by the prosecutor himself, that he didn't come strong or forthright with the information that would allow the state and the prosecution to indict the so-called proverbial ham sandwich. So if they're not attempting to win a case, if that's not their goal or their desire, and they give you a half-hearted presentation, or they give a half-hearted presentation to the grand jury, then we can expect that there will be a no true bill in cases such as this, and that's what we got.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why, or the primary reason why this particular jurist is so outraged is that the Attorney General made it appear as if the reason why there was no indictment is because of grand jury. So he attempted to put the ball in their court. And this particular jurist is saying, no, 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 wait a minute. No, you gave us no presentation because, as you stated, Julian, it's been said throughout the years, it's a well-known fact that the district attorney's office or prosecutors can indict a ham sandwich because the presentation to the grand jury is really a partial presentation. You know, the defense, although the defendants can testify, the district attorney is the only one who's able to speak. A defense attorney is not allowed to speak or make questions or raise issues towards the grand jury. It's all the prosecutors feel. They're the only ones that have the opportunity to make a presentation. It's an uncontested presentation as well. You know, so normally when a district attorney or prosecutor has a few charges in mind and makes a presentation to the grand jury, since it's always so one-sided, they always usually get an indictment. So this particular jurist was outraged because in the Attorney General's presentation to the public, he made it appear as if this was the grand jury's decision not to indict Officer Mattingly Cosgrove, but it was really the decision of Attorney General Daniel Cameron. And instead of saying that, instead of him saying, listen, personally, I didn't think these officers should be charged, so I made no presentation to the grand jury, he sort of made some subtle implications in his press conference, pointing the finger at the grand jury for their not being charged.
Now, Noel, you just slightly glossed over the prosecuting attorney that he did not even present a case towards the other two officers that were involved in the shooting. He made it appear as if the grand jury made the decision not to indict, but they weren't even presented with the information.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information. As I stated earlier, you know, the 12 neighbors who said they never heard the officers announce themselves. The individual who did say he heard the officers announce themselves contradicted himself because initially he said he didn't. Of course, we learned now that the sergeant that was shot, the ballistics cannot determine that the round was fired from Breonna Taylor's boyfriend's gun, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend's gun. And although he had a 9mm weapon, there were two police officers present, including the one that did get indicted, who had 9mm. So a lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people automatically assumed that ballistics have shown that the round that was fired into this sergeant's leg came from Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, but it could have been a situation of friendly fire. We also learned that he said nothing about, let me see. Okay, we have the manslaughter. You know, also there's other charges that he could have represented as opposed to manslaughter to the officer that was indicted. So there's a whole lot of concerns. You know, there's a whole lot of concerns that members of the community have as more additional information comes out. And it's very important that the public gets an opportunity to look at the grand jury recordings and the transcripts so we can see what actually was said and what actually wasn't said. Because there's a lot about this case that's coming out now that is problematic.
So what does this say about our judicial system? What does this say about our prosecutorial system? What does it say about the inequities that exist when we talk about the duplicity in a justice system where it's black and white, meaning that there's a prosecutorial or judicial system for white folks, and there's a judicial system, prosecutorial system for black folks?
Well, this is definitely a flawed system. And although we know that nothing's perfect, as long as you have human beings dealing in the system, that's not going to be perfect. But we don't have an expectation of perfection. But this system, as we presently have it, this criminal system of injustice in America that we presently have is beyond being flawed. This particular Attorney General clearly was biased in his presentation, and his biasness, I believe, trickled into his decision and the way he did his job, and that shouldn't happen. You know, he's a Republican, and he's very, very friendly He spoke at the Republican National Convention. That shouldn't matter, of course, because, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, as long as you do your job correctly, as long as you're fair and unbiased, then, then people should be happy. But clearly, I think, in my humble opinion, his politics has entered into his decision and in the way that he decided to prosecute this case. And I've talked about this when we talked about Thurgood Marshall, even as it relates to the Supreme Court. Right now, there's a great debate as it relates to the president deciding to pick a member of the Supreme Court. And of course, the Republicans are saying that he should be able to do it. Democrats are saying that he shouldn't, that they should wait like they did with Obama to the next president. But in my humble opinion, it shouldn't matter if you pick by a Republican or a president. The question should be if you're qualified, but the way the Supreme Court is made up now, and as it relates to those members who are selected to join the Supreme Court, it seems as if their personal bias, if they're Republican, if they're conservative, if they're Democrat and independent, that affects the decision. And that's why we have this big clamor as it relates to who gets to pick a member of the Supreme Court, because we can sometimes predetermine how they're going to decide. And Julian, I just went the long way to answer your question. That shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter whether somebody is conservative, whether somebody's Republican, whether somebody's Democrat or independent or progressive, in terms of how they're going to make a decision on the case. They should leave their personal biases, their personal preferences, their personal political affiliations to decide when they're going to investigate or make a decision on the case. So when you ask about the system, it's indeed flawed, and that alone at the highest court of the land is a manifestation of how flawed this process, how flawed judges' decisions are, because it seems as if everyone is making a decision based on some predetermined opinions that they have. And that's highly unfortunate. That highly shows how flawed this criminal system of injustice is.
Right. Well, I'm gonna deviate, and then I'm gonna come back, and then I'm gonna deviate again. Very quickly, we just want to say that we're on YouTube Live right now, and we have some people watching, and I just want to give a shout out. Unfortunately, I have my glasses on. Gail Kamadi, I can't really see the name that well, says the conscious one. We appreciate you watching. We have a multitude of people that are watching live. Thanks for watching. I'll try to make sure I give you guys a shout out, and hopefully we'll be coming live frequently, and you'll have an opportunity to see us as we are going right now. But Noel, just very quickly, you and I had talked about this in the past. The FBI came out with statistics of the number of law enforcement entities that are taking part in white supremacist groups and white supremacist, let me rephrase that, white supremacist groups that are joining law enforcement, police departments. They're becoming part of the judicial system. They're becoming part of multitudes of different facets of law enforcement agencies to utilize their white supremacist ideologies. It was reported that these white supremacist groups are actually recruiting members from law enforcement, and vice versa. They're requesting their members to become members of law enforcement and to benefit them in their white supremacist quest. Now, there was a report that was issued, but they had some information that was redacted from that report. But just recently, the full report was released, I guess as much as they could, that talked about even the FBI had been infiltrated by some of these white supremacist groups.
Yes, and that should be very, very frightening. And although the FBI, and mind you, Julian, you said the FBI said this. This is not Community Cop. Mm-hmm. This is not Michael Graves, who's not here with us today. This is not Noel Leader. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation have made this determination that these white supremacist organizations have encouraged their members to join law enforcement agencies throughout the nation. And when you think about that, you say, well, what will be the end result? Are they just trying to improve the working class of their members? Do they just want them to have better benefits or better jobs? No, they want their members in these particular agencies because these agencies are very influential in terms of making arrests, prosecutions, uses of deadly force, controlling a particular community. So this is something that our community should be greatly concerned about. When you have the highest intelligence agency in the country, the FBI, making this kind of determination, I mean, alarm bells should be ringing. There's been instances where police chiefs, members of law enforcement agencies have been terminated because of their affiliation with groups like the Ku Klux Klan. And, that should be ringing alarm bells. When you look at the uptick in video filming of members of the African-American community being murdered by police officers, being physically abused, when you look at this aggressive, unnecessary physical abuse that has taken place for such minor infractions and sometimes not even crimes, we have to really be alarmed. What is the cause of all of this? What is the motivation for all of this? And I don't think it's out of the line of question to ask, is an order that was given years ago by these white supremacist groups for their members to join police, law enforcement agencies throughout the country. Is this what we're actually seeing? And that question is not being asked, and that's highly unfortunate. And it should cause great alarm with members of the African-American community. But unfortunately, it hasn't up to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we look at these cases and we look at how the FBI is responding and how these law enforcement agencies are responding, and we look at these cases that are occurring, when we talk about the Breonna Taylor cases, when we talk about the prosecution by the district attorney's office, when we talk about the over aggressive policing in some of our communities, in most of our communities, when we talk about the inequities and arrests and summonses, all these things are intertwined. These things are connected. And if we don't find a way to respond to the aggressive attack by these white supremacist groups in its totality, we talk about in our entire society, then we are going to continuously be subjected to the ills. I mean, if we can't have a prosecuting head of a district fairly prosecuted case, when we talk about a woman who was shot unjustly, unarmed in her home, where do we go to find justice in these particular cases?
And we're talking about the entire criminal system of injustice, man. We're talking about police, because it starts there. These are the individuals who have so much control over a member of our communities. They have the right to summons, the right to stop, question, and frisk, the right to arrest, the right to use deadly physical force. But then it goes into the Department of Corrections. How many, we have over, 1 million African Americans affiliated with the criminal system of injustice. The incarceration numbers are off the roof. So how many members of these white supremacist organizations have joined the Department of Corrections? We have Department of Parole, Department of Probation. We have district attorneys. We have racist judges. So throughout this whole system of criminal injustice, that has so much contact, that has so much personal contact with members of our community, which has so much great effect on Black families. When the father is incarcerated, when the father or the mother is arrested, this criminal system of injustice in this country has had a very damaging impact, and has a great impact on the Black community because of our constant interaction. Many times we articulate on this program, so much unnecessary contact. So we ought to be greatly concerned when the FBI, when the Federal Bureau of Investigations says that a lot of these white supremacist organizations have encouraged their members to join and become a part of America's criminal system of injustice.
Well, now, and in this report by the FBI, they didn't just talk about the white officers that are joining these groups and are part of these groups and being told to join and being recruited. They talked about sympathizers. There are members of these police departments to become sympathizers to these white nationalist groups. Okay, just recently, a Louisville police officer, now she was a major for their police department. She just had written in a post that the Black Lives Matter movement group are full of punks, and these are people who are always going to be living in their mother's basements. So she has a dislike and a disdain for the group. Now she's supposed to be protecting these people who are lawfully protesting and people who are using their constitutional rights to request fairness and equity throughout this nation. But meanwhile, her position is that they're punks, as if they're going to live in their basements, and whatever other negative statements she may have made. Now, she's been suspended from her post, but now I always talk about this. She was a major in her police department, and I can equate that to, in the New York City Police Department, a inspector or deputy inspector, someone very high ranking in the department. They make policy, they make decisions, they decide who's going to be in what position, they give promotions, they do a multitude of things in their departments. When you have that mentality and you have that kind of power in your police department, that's very problematic for the people that you are there to protect. I was going to use the term police, but then you are to serve and protect. That's a major problem in my thought process. Noel?
Right. And, I agree, because our opinion is you can't legislate love. You can't legislate respect. Some of these people have these particular personal notions, and fine, you're allowed a right to your personal opinion. But it becomes problematic when these individuals impose their personal opinion when they do in the manner by which they do their job, especially in contact with members of the African-American community. A lot of these individuals, unfortunately, transfer their personal dislike, their personal prejudices, their personal racist attitudes, when they put the uniform, and it's manifested in the way that by which they deal with the members of African-American and Latino communities. And that's unacceptable. That's very problematic, especially as a member of the African-American community, and this shouldn't be allowed. So when these individuals, as you always say to Julian, a lot of times when you have these inspectors, chiefs, super chiefs, and police commissioners, when they have these kind of feelings or the kind of sentiments, it trickles down to their subordinates. And that's a lot of times that's what we see far too often. So when you say this particular authority figure, and there's been others in the past who have been caught with this racist mentality, it becomes very, very problematic and a serious issue that we have to deal with.
Absolutely. Now, these problems that we talk about are widespread. We talk about issues that affect this country. Sometimes we talk about issues that occur within this city, but this is a global phenomenon. Racism isn't just an issue or an entity that exists within the United States. I was just reading an article about a sister. Her name is Alexandra Wilson. She's a barista, an attorney in England. Now, she was working in the courts, and one day she was stopped 3 times, and they assumed that she was a defendant. And she was reaching out to the heads of the courts and saying, listen, this is a constant issue that I'm facing. She made numerous complaints. People who actually worked there, her white colleagues, sometimes had to either verify that she was actually an attorney. They're doing an investigation in an attempt to find out why this is a problem and why this young lady is always being stopped. But unfortunately, this racist mentality that exists within our judicial system is not just a national issue, it's a global issue. And our response to this attack on African people has to be a collective response. We have been dealing with this since we forced to step foot on the lands of this nation. But the response from white people, and we cannot look for them to change the way they operate without a demand from our community. So we have to really do a real staunch thought process to ensure that we can address their response to us, because the attack on our community is so strong and so staunch and nonstop that unless we force the hand, it's not going to change.
Right. And, if you look at the comment of Constance one, he said this problem of white supremacy is a global one. And, he's 100% correct. You talk about something that happened over shores to a sister who's a professional and experiencing the same things that some of our Black professionals experience right here in New York City. White supremacy, racism is definitely a problem that we have to deal with, and it affects all areas of existence, including education, economics, entertainment, labor law, sex, religion, and war. And we do have to become, conscious of it. And whenever these discussions are had, whether we're talking about the Breonna Taylor case or some other police brutality case, the part of white supremacy and racism is a part that is frequently left out. And that really is the core problem of a lot of these police brutality cases, these police killings. As you stated, Julian, with this sister being stopped so many times, she understands that she's being stopped because she's Black. So the component of racism, white supremacy, in terms of fitting into the calculation of why these things keep on happening, is very frequently left out. Racism, white supremacy is a problem, and none of these issues, from this sister overseas being stopped frequently to Breonna Taylor being killed in a house while she's sleeping in bed, to the Kentucky Attorney General giving false information, making a false presentation as it relates to her death. None of these things are going to go away until we deal with the core issue, which is racism, white supremacy, which is our community, members of our community being victimized by racism and racists, be they police officers, be they correction officers, be they district attorneys, be they judges, be they attorney generals. Racism, white supremacy is the core to much of what we're seeing today.
Right. And we have to really pay attention to the nexus, to how all these things are connected. And Noel, you're 100% correct. But I wanted to talk about something else that we had discussed earlier. Last night, there was a presidential debate between Donald Trump and the Vice President Biden. Noel, I know that you had an opportunity to watch it. I know we discussed it in depth earlier. Your thoughts on this, if we want to call this a debate?
Was that a presidential debate?
Well, that's what they said it was. I mean, but if you watched it, I think it was more of not even a high school race for presidential debate. I can't even fathom anybody even imagining that we would have two people who are vying for the position of presidency and one already holding that position to conduct themselves in such a manner. And, when I looked at it, one of the things that really came to my mind was that this is being watched on a worldwide stage.
That's right.
This is a reflection of this nation. And can you imagine what the leaders of other nations, what the denizens of other nations thought as they saw the heads of our state responding, acting, and conducting themselves in such a manner?
Yeah, when you talk about presidential debate, I mean, there's nothing presidential. There has been nothing presidential about Donald Trump. I mean, he's an embarrassment to this country. He's an embarrassment to the democratic process and to democracy. He's an embarrassment to the office. And I've known we've had, more greater or equally racist or worse individuals than Donald Trump throughout our history. Some of them were slaveholders. But Donald Trump is an embarrassment, and that should not even be debatable. Anyone, whether or not you support him, whether or not you're a Republican, whether or not you consider yourself to be conservative, anyone that would approve of the way he behaved, and I'm not even talking about in the last 3 years, but in particular as it relates to this particular debate last night, anyone that would approve of that, who cannot say that he was not presidential, he was an embarrassment, he was disrespectful, he was arrogant, and anyone who would approve of that is part of the problem. And as you stated, Julian, the American debate, you and I have traveled together in the past, and we know that a lot of these foreign nations that we go to, they have access to these TV stations, so they view some of the same things that we view. And it's an embarrassment. It's an international embarrassment. It's a global embarrassment. It's a reflection on American people that we have such an individual in office in charge of one of the strongest and largest militaries on the planet Earth, one of the strongest and largest economies on the planet Earth, one of the strongest and largest nations on the planet Earth. Is this the individual who's a representative of all of that? So as you say to Julian, it's an embarrassment. It's not only a national embarrassment, it's an international embarrassment. You know, he made some statements, some comments that were very disrespectful. Of course, he refused to denounce some of the white supremacist groups that we talked about earlier. And for the President of the United States of America, I mean, regardless of how he feels personally, you know, because we all know that Donald Trump is a racist white supremacist, but you would figure that being the President of the United States, being a politician, which he claims he's not, but he is because the president's political office, would be more diplomatic in terms of some of his positions, because after all, he is supposed to represent the entire nation. So for his inability to castigate or criticize or repudiate white supremacist groups and organizations is it's the ultimate sham and the ultimate embarrassment of this country, but it's a reflection of where we are.
Well, see, for me, that doesn't surprise me because, first of all, his supporters, that's his core group. His core group is the white supremacists that are in opposition of fairness and equity when we talk about the rights of African people and any people who they consider minorities, which I don't consider minorities. That is his core support. And when he speaks, he's speaking to them. He is not going to say anything that he thinks will go in opposition of the people that support him. And I also don't believe that he has the ability to curb his white supremacist way of thinking. I think that when he speaks from his heart. I don't think that he thinks, I don't think that he has the ability to say, well, listen, let me make an assessment on what I'm saying so it doesn't sound as harsh or unfair as it actually is when I'm speaking to the American people. He has no governor. He has no governor. Nothing can curb how he responds. So I'm not surprised by that. But the problem I have is the debate in its totality. It was such a disruptive debate. I mean, the moderator had no control of the stage. The president continued to speak over the moderator, over the vice president, over Vice President Biden, and it was just totally out of control. But also, there was nothing that I heard that addressed the issues of the nation. I can't go back and think about anything where I heard something that said, you know what, that is a topic that they discussed that's going to benefit this nation. I didn't hear any of that. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I fell asleep. I don't know. But as I listened to the debate, I didn't see or gain anything that would make me say, you know what, that's going to be good for the nation.
Yeah, well, Julian, you're 100% correct. It definitely was not a constructive, informative debate. And that's basically what debates are supposed to be about, allowing the electorate to hear the point of views of two candidates and then make a decision based on their responses to questions of who they line up behind and who they ultimately would vote for. And I want to go back to something that you said, Julian, that Donald Trump is appealing to a small group, to his core group. Well, I would have to consider if Donald Trump is appealing to his core group, and if his core groups are those very vehement white supremacists, the question has to be asked, do they represent a majority of America or minority of America? Because it would be to his undoing if he appealed to only a small group of Americans only. Then, of course, when you have a democratic process, then he would lose if he's only appealing to a small group. But in his mind, his core group is a majority. When he makes these racist, outlandish comments, when he refuses to repudiate white supremacist groups, in his mind, he believes that the majority of America, which is his core, which he believes is his core group, agrees with him. He don't believe that the majority of Americans would punish him for not criticizing or repudiating these white supremacist groups. And we'll have to ultimately see if he's correct. If he gets elected a second time, because mind you, he made some of these same similar outlandish comments when he ran the first time and he got elected president. So in his head, he's speaking the message to the majority. And, in history past, they used to call them, President Reagan used to call them the silent majority. Donald Trump believes in his racist dogma, in his racist tone and tenet, that he's appealing to the majority of Americans, that a majority of Americans, after hearing him, after seeing him perform, will still support him. And time will tell if he's correct. But as you stated, Julian, this was not an informative debate. This is more about political theatrics and anything else. And American people should be outraged.
But I have to ask a question, just based on what you just said, which made me ponder. You said, is he appealing to the majority or the minority, right?
Right.
Now, Congress, when we talk about the Senate, he has a large number of Republicans that are supporting him. And right now, they're in the majority, correct?
Correct.
And they represent a portion of this nation, which includes a large number of denizens, people that live in this country. So, I mean, it makes me wonder, is that thought process in the minds of the majority of American people?
And then that's
because like I said, he has a very strong support in Congress right now.
In the Senate, in the Senate as well.
Right.
And you bring up a good point. If senators thought their constituents in their particular states would be outraged over some of the actions and comments of the president, then I believe they would turn on him. But these senators and some, as you say, the congressional figures, they believe that their constituents, the people that put them in office, support the president. And that's why they don't do what is obvious and which all of us would expect them to do in the sane world, is that they will be critical of some of the comments and actions of the president. But as you stated, Julian, these congressmen who refuse to repudiate the president or criticize him or try to pull his coat, even if it's behind closed doors, to change his tone and tenet, these state senators who pat him on the back and make excuses for him all these years and don't separate themselves from him, I believe they believe that their constituents approve of what the president is saying and what the president is doing. So is it a minority of individuals who believe and approve of what he's saying, or is it a majority of Americans? Presently, I believe the state senators and the congressional individuals who still support him and refuse to criticize him believe that their constituents agree with what the president is saying and what the president is doing.
Right. Now, I I agree with you as well, but it begs me to question: do they have the same beliefs? Are these things finally coming to expose what the people who are in power truly believe relative to their relationships with our community and how they respond to the needs of our community? I mean, because this attack, our attack is right now, we're talking about the relationship between law enforcement in our community. We're talking about the relationship between the judicial system in our community, but this is actually broader than that. There are issues that are affecting us through healthcare, because he always talk about the, as he calls it, Obamacare, how he wants to repeal that. So those are issues we have to talk about. We have to talk about the educational system that's failing in our communities. We have to talk about housing that's failing in our communities. So this is a very broad, wide web of inequities that exist in our community that's not being addressed federally nor locally, because the struggles are continuing. And as we elect the members to Congress, as we have our elected officials on the local level who refuse to address and deal with these issues that are malaffecting our community, we have to find a way to revisit this electoral process that is continuously and constantly failing us. And I know, Noel, you always say, and I agree with you 100%, all politics are local, but until we find a way to address it, and I know that I went from national politics to local politics, but we have to find a way to address these ills that are constantly lying on the backs of our community and members of our community.
And going back to your earlier statement, Julian, about President Trump, this is an individual who, when asked, will he accept the results of an election if he loses? To date, he has refused to say that he would. And some would even say that he stated contrary to that. And his comments, his position strikes at the core of democracy. I mean, his statements his sentiments is some that you would expect in a dictatorship. When you have a leader who refuses to leave office, irregardless of what the people say. He wants to be in office, he wants to stay in office, so he refuses and rejects any attempt by the people that he's supposed to rule over, who may say that they want him out of office. Donald Trump has not agreed. As a matter of fact, he made statements basically saying that he doesn't agree, that if he doesn't win this election, he will not accept the results. And for individuals in Congress and in the Senate, I'm talking about politicians responsible, this strikes at the core of democracy. This strikes at the core of a democratic system, a democratic process. And it's an outrage that more of them haven't criticized him and continue to make excuses for him. But as I stated, they believe their constituents have his back, and basically what Donald Trump is calling for is a civil war. This is a throwback unto, President Lincoln, signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and Southern governors and Southern senators disagreeing with him. And they, said, it's time to pick up arms because we agree with some of the positions of Northerners. And that's basically what President Donald Trump is calling for, a dismantling on the democratic process that we've known in America for centuries, by stating that he might not accept the results, if he loses. Preposterous.
But Noel, you said something. You just said that he's operating as a dictator. Now, if you listen to him, when he talks about the other heads of state and other nations that he support and that he has relationships with, they're all dictators. They're all dictators. When you talk about China, when you talk about Russia, listen to this man. He actually, I believe that he wants to be in the same position as these dictators, that he idolizes these dictators. And he's trying to the best of his ability, push this nation towards a dictatorship. Watch how he operates. Listen to the things that he says. He is very dogmatic in his positions. He will not acquiesce to anyone. Even when they catch him being dishonest, disingenuous, not, in contradiction of something he said in the past, he's steadfast. He stands strong, and he will fight all the people that are interviewing him, the reporters. You have to listen to some of his comments, how he responds. He operates as a dictator.
Yeah, and even members of his own staff that he imports, that he puts in these positions, when they disagree with him, he simply fires them. I don't care what field you're talking about. If he appoints you because you're a specialist in a particular field, be it the military, be it the health commission, if you make a statement that he disagrees with, he basically gets rid of you. And what I would say to the American public is one can only imagine, looking at the arrogance of President Trump, he thinks that everything he does is the best ever. No one has ever did it better. If you look at the arrogance that he manifests today, one can only imagine if he gets elected a second time. Can you imagine the kind of monster we're going to have to deal with? He's going to think that that's a referendum on his arrogance, on his racism, on his, functioning, as you stated, as a dictator. He's going to believe that the American people are applauding him and encourage him to continue this. And I can only imagine, the kind of person that we're going to have to deal with if he's elected to a second term, and the kind of monster and the kind of society that we're going to have. There's certain things. Well, I'll leave it there. But it's going to be very interesting.
Well, it's unfortunate that we don't have the checks and balances that's supposed to exist within our government. I don't think that we have the judicial system that's supposed to be checking the executive branch. The executive branch is supposed to be checking the legislative branch. It's not happening. There's been a development of this all-inclusive system that's supposed to be a system of 3 of checks and balances, but now it's morphed into this I don't even know what to call it, like a blob, and it's failing. Until we realize that as an electorate, we have to hold each branch responsible. We have to make sure that this system works, because as you put people with the mindset of a Donald Trump in these positions, who believes that he is unstoppable, who believes that he has all the answers, who believes that he should be a dictator, that he can do whatever he wants to do, this system is crumbling. It's falling apart. And the people that are going to be affected are the residents, the denizens of this nation. And unless we collectively respond to this dictator, we are going to be subjected to his whims. And unfortunately, Black folks are going to receive the worst of it all.
And that's why, Julian, you always say that we ought to develop ourselves politically, economically, educationally. Aside from this system, we have to establish our own, because this system, if it's not, one thing that Donald Trump has made it clear is that America is a dysfunctional democracy. Now I'll say it again, America is a dysfunctional democracy. And everything about what we're seeing is dysfunctional. You know, the line has been drawn in the sand, and politicians, they no longer care about what's in the best interest for the country, what's in the best interest for the American people. They've drawn this line in the sand, and they've taken political sides. They're taking sides, making votes, having positions and responses based upon their political affiliation. That's what in the best interest for their constituents or the country. You know, and I hope that I explained it well when I talked about the Supreme Court, the decision, or who's going to pick the Supreme Court justice. You know, it shouldn't matter whether or not she's a Republican or Democrat, conservative, liberal. If they're qualified, if they're a real good judge, they should make decisions as it relates to, you know, their position as a Supreme Court justice based on the evidence that somebody brings to one particular case. But now it's all about your political affiliation. We should not be able to know how a judge is going to decide prior to them ever even hearing the case or the evidence. I don't care what they are, Republican or Democrat. We shouldn't be able to determine how they're going to vote before. Julian, we have a dysfunctional democracy.
You're 100% right, and I will be repeating that as I have conversations with people when we talk about this political system. But we're running out of time. We only have about 2 minutes left. Closing comments, Noel.
Julian, you're the last hope, brother. You got to run for something, man. You got to run. Julian, stop laughing, brother. You got to run for something. Lenny Lou, I love you. Kitty Cat, I love you. Little Mo, Big Mike, hopefully we see you next week. Community Cop fans, we love you as well.
Listen, Noel leader for president. That's all I have to say. Noel leader for president. Listen, Harper family, Leader family, Darlene, Sharon, I love you guys. Keep watching us. We hope that you're watching live right now, because this was a surprise to us. Hopefully we'll be able to do this. If it works, yeah, we're live, man. We are live. So listen, thanks for watching, guys. Veronica, Kate, you're doing a phenomenal job. Big D, man, we love you guys doing a great job. We appreciate you. You guys got us up live. Thank you so much. Community Cop family, man, keep watching. We love you guys. You know, give us some comments. Let us know what you like and what you don't like. As Noel stated, subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down. Let us know what you like, and we'll keep coming at you. Keep watching Community Cop. One time, Noel.
Peace.
All right. See you next week.
Oh, he's really good. All right, guys. We're actually still live. Just let you know. The show's ended for the edited part, but just letting you know that we're live. I'm going to actually read some of the last comments if you guys want to shout out to them. What you call it? Conscious One says, I hope y'all do a live show on YouTube so we can call in. Don't know if we'll be able to call in, but you'll definitely be able to ask the questions. He's in New Orleans.
Wow.
I'm able to watch the show live. Yeah. And then he also said, I think we need a second term of Trump to get the rest of the community to wake up.
And I understand that position. I actually understand that position.
I was going to say, I know Noel kind of agrees with that.
Because trust you me, if the Democrats get in office, our people, our community is going to fall back asleep thinking that it is well, and it's not.
Mm-hmm. And someone comment about all of your degrees back there.
Oh yeah, that's
Julian.
right. Yeah, let me find out. Let me get the name of the person that made that comment. BNO HBLO. I guess I don't even know how to pronounce it. He says, look how many degrees that guy got on his wall. Little does he know that there's another wall.
Let me tell you, I need glasses. I cannot see. The writing is too small. It's blurry. Oh, can you read it,
Amazing
Noel?
job, though.
Yeah,
Amazing
you
job.
guys did a phenomenal job, especially since, and I'm gonna let everyone else who's watching this on YouTube live now that these guys are so professional. We didn't even tell them that we're going live until after we were live.
You're gonna have to explain it to me. How are we live?
We're live on YouTube. I'll explain the technical parts to you later. I don't want to do it right now while we're live. So yeah, so for the live part, I guess we'll say goodbye to them and then we'll chat privately. So thanks guys for everyone watching. You want to hop in and say anything?
I can't see me. Yay, peace. Veronica here. Okay.
Yeah.